I'm Boston City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo. I'm chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It is Tuesday, December 5th, and this hearing is on docket 1721, petition for a special law regarding an act relative to voting for all legal residents in the city of Boston, sponsored by Councilor Kendra Lara and referred to the committee on November 15th, 2023. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law, including the requirements that public bodies conduct their meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will conduct this hearing remotely, and it is being recorded. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while ensuring public access to deliberations through adequate alternative means. This hearing is being recorded and is being live streamed at www.boston.gov City Council TV and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and FiOS 964. To provide written testimony, members of the public can also email the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov. If members of the public would like to provide public testimony and have not signed up to do so, please email Christine O'Donnell at christine.o'donnell, which is ODONNELL, at boston.gov to request a link. I want to stress that we need your information. So if you're providing public testimony via video conference, please ensure that your Zoom is aligned in terms of the name with the name that you signed up for. That's especially important if you're dialing in the phone number or if you have an unrecognizable username, we won't be able to call you. So please make sure that your name appears on Zoom. The proposal before us today would authorize the election department to make available upon request voter registration forms for all immigrants with legal status so that they may participate in municipal elections and cast ballots for local offices. These forms would be available to immigrants with legal status who are 18 years of age or older and reside in the city of Boston. The election department would be required to maintain a list of these voters and print out a separate ballot for them should a local ballot question appear on a state election ballot. This separate ballot would be printed at the election department's expense. Immigrants with legal status registering to vote would be required to sign under pains and penalties of perjury a voter registration form declaring that they are legal residents of Boston and the United States and in good faith intend to become U.S. citizens. They would remain eligible to vote as long as they remain a legal resident in the city of Boston. This afternoon, I am joined by my colleagues, Councilor Lara, who is the lead sponsor, Councilor Braden, Councilor Coletta, Councilor Murphy, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Louis Jen, and Councilor Fernandez Anderson. And so I'm going to give everybody a chance for an opening statement. We do have, just as a FYI, we have a hearing tonight. And so I want to make sure that we're running on sort of a time-conscious schedule so that our staff has time to prepare for that. Our central staff has time to prepare for that. But I'm going to go to Councilor Lara, and then I'll go through order of appearance. So Councilor Lara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of my colleagues, our panelists, and our neighbors who've joined us this afternoon to have this important conversation. This is our second hearing on this matter. And when I delivered my maiden speech, I really envisioned a truly participatory and representative democracy for the city of Boston. This is a vision, and it was one that was passed down to us by leaders like Ida B. Wells, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Dr. Martin Luther King. And it had one simple aim. It was to ensure that we the people means all of the people. And in a time where states and cities all across the country are systemically disenfranchising voters and the Voting Rights Act remains at risk, we have a responsibility to really expand access to the ballot and reaffirm our commitment as a city to a strong representative democracy. As it stands, anywhere from 68,000 to 100,000 immigrants with legal status live in Boston. This includes lawful permanent residents, visa holders, TPS, and DACA recipients. These are our neighbors. They raise their children here, attend our schools, clean our streets, serve our food. They're entrepreneurs, CEOs. They run our nonprofit organizations, and they direct resources to the city in form of taxes. And more importantly, they invest in the future of the city of Boston. My father is one of those people. He spent over 30 years in this country working, paying taxes, sending me and my siblings and I to school, putting us through college, and watching all of us really pour our gifts back into our communities. But a couple of years ago, when I, his youngest daughter, ran for public office, he couldn't cast his vote. And our story is not unique. All across the city and right here in the city council chambers, we have people who, despite not being given a voice in their local government through the ballot, have worked, sacrificed, and invested in their neighborhoods. And all people should have a say in the decisions that impact their daily lives. But if you are one of those people that believe that voting is a privilege, I believe that our neighbors have more than earned it. The ballot really does have power, and although it seemingly stands as a single note, it really has the ability to help us join in a symphony and change the tune of our city to one that we can all sing along to. So regardless of your immigration status, my hope is that we can have a conversation today that moves us one step closer to this collective vision that we have of a representative and participatory democracy where all of our residents have a voice in their local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lara. I'm going to go in order of arrival. I also want to note we've been joined by Councilor Worrell and Councilor Mejia. Councilor Braden, the floor is yours for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor for bringing this one forward. As an immigrant myself, and having spent 12 years before I could actually vote in an election, this is very near and dear to my heart. I was very active and worked on campaigns, and I was a community activist long before I could actually vote. And so I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I think it's a direction that we should be going in. But I also want to see all the pros and cons and how to make it. One concern that was raised early on was, if there was confusion about election voter status, that if someone made a mistake and voted in a federal election, that they would jeopardize their citizenship opportunities at a later time. So I think there's ways to put in safeguards to that question, but I certainly look forward to the conversation, and we'll be interested to hear from all of the panels and all of the folks this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Coletta, followed by Councilor Murphy.
So much, Chair. I want to thank the lead sponsor for bringing this important conversation to the body. I also wanted to shout out Attorney General Jerry Campbell for her leadership then as Council President when she introduced a similar order and subsequent hearing in 2018. So this is just a continuation of all of that great work with many individuals contributing to it. The city has a rich immigrant history for those seeking opportunities for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. East Boston in particular has always been welcoming and inclusive of these families from distant shores, including my own, who would be extremely proud to know their great-grandchild is having this conversation with you all today in the City Council. A lot of my constituents are legal permanent residents. They are here legally. They pay taxes. They are community leaders. They are my neighbors, my friends, and my chosen family. As a council body, we, and myself personally, have stood in solidarity many times with legal permanent residents like Dreamers and TPS holders when demanding their right to live freely and enjoy the same economic prosperity as their tax-paying peers. So we owe it to them to at least continue this conversation to discuss the feasibility and exploration of what this might look like. It's also worth mentioning, and I am looking forward to the Elections Department and their presentation, that we have well over 400,000 people who could vote in local elections. And I think only about 20% of them do in municipal years. So I know a lot of TPS holders and Dreamers who would do whatever they can to take advantage of this privilege that many do not. So I am looking forward to this conversation, forward to the testimony, and thank you again for putting this forward in the body. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Coletta. Councilor Murphy, followed by Councilor Flynn.
Thank you to the chair and to the sponsor. I'm here to listen to the panelists, to this conversation. I've often said that my biggest concern is that in many precincts, sometimes less than 10% or a 20% turnout for those who are registered and can legally vote turnout. So to me, it's a bigger conversation about getting people involved in the democratic process and getting people to vote. But here for this conversation, and I know sometimes or oftentimes there's a confusion about who would be considered and what does an actual legal permanent resident. I know my colleagues know that, but the conversation about what rights they have now and what this would allow them. So thank you for all the panelists who were here and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor. In the interest of time, I will not provide an opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Louis Jen, followed by Councilor Fernandez Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. Excited to be here for this conversation that continues the work that we've done on the council and that other councils have done. Regardless of immigration status, we all share the same interest in having good schools, affordable housing, effective transportation, clean environment, and by not allowing non-citizens to vote, we create essentially a permanent underclass that's not represented and whose voices aren't heard. So looking forward to this conversation and to hearing from the administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandes Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For many of you know here that for me, it's a firsthand experience that I lived in this country for 17 years without documentation. And then my first time voting was actually 2019, the year before running for office. And so way to go, the classes at ABCD for teaching me civics and then getting into the politics. I would say that it's criminal to actually have taxation without representation at this point. And the irony of us as non-natives to this country, meaning that you're not Indian Americans, that you're not Native Americans, to having a conversation about who should have rights, who is legal, who can vote, who cannot, is absolutely ridiculous and ironic. So I look forward to the conversation, and I think that states well where my position is. I hope that my colleagues won't shy away from doing the right thing here and moving this forward. Thank you. And thank you for the lead sponsor for filing.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Worrell, and then Councillor Mejia.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor for bringing this forward and everyone who played a part in keeping this conversation going throughout the years. And as a son of immigrants, I saw, my grandparents and parents, contribute to the community, pay taxes, give back, but have to, earn the right to vote. So I'm just looking forward to this conversation, looking to hear from the administration. But this is something that I do support. So looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Worrell. Councillor Mejia.
Thank you, Chair. Just curious if you can hear me. I'm having bad internet issues. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I just want to thank the lead sponsor for bringing this forth. As many of you all know, I won by only one vote, so every single vote matters, especially those votes from people who are living the realities and or doing the work that never have proper representation. I think, my mom was undocumented for a period of time, but she never stopped participating in my life and also in government in whatever way that she could. And what better way to honor those who are paying their taxes and doing everything in their power to navigate a system that oftentimes neglects them than to giving them the right to vote. I think that this is an opportunity for us to join other cities across the country that have already stepped up, and I'm just really grateful for my colleague, Councilor Lara, for her courageous, right? Because this is really all about like meeting a moment and understanding who it is that we're here to fight for and fighting for people. I'm so happy to stand alongside you and looking forward to hearing from the administration, in particular, some of the things that we've heard about unintended consequences of people who sign up to vote that are not U.S. citizens. So I just want to make sure that as the elections department provides some input, would love to hear how we're going to make sure that we protect people and make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences and that prevents people from participating and becoming a naturalized citizen in the future. So if you could spend a little bit of time on that, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm here to listen and learn and be a part of the conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our panel. We're joined today by Median Albert, Senior Attorney at Lawyers for Civil Rights, Anita Tavares, the Commissioner for the Election Commission, Sabino Piemonte, who is the Head Assistant Registrar of Voters, Jesse Carpenter, who is the City Clerk, and from Nube in East Boston, Eni Lovo, who's the Lead Coordinator for Nube East Boston. And then after the panel, I will allow councilors to go and ask questions in the order of arrival if you have questions, and then we will go to community comment. with that, I think we should start probably with Median. I don't know if anybody else has prepared a statement, but what we'll do is we'll start with Median, and then if any other panelist has prepared opening or a statement, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to questions. So Median, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilor Lara, for bringing this forth. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marian Albert, and I am a senior attorney with Lawyers for Civil Rights in Boston. LCR is a nonprofit legal organization whose primary mission is to fight discrimination on behalf of people of color and immigrants. We respectfully submit this testimony at today's hearing before the Committee on Government Operations in support of extending municipal voting rights to immigrants with legal status. This step is crucial in fostering inclusive civic engagement and strengthening our local democracy. Immigrants, regardless of citizenship status, contribute significantly to the vitality and diversity of our community. In Boston, immigrants play a crucial role in our community, from cultivating and preparing our food, constructing our residences and structures, providing essential care for our elderly and ill population, to opening and running businesses and serving as lawyers and researchers. Immigrants also make a significant financial contribution to the city's economy, paying over $3.8 billion in state and local taxes and wielding a substantial spending power of $30.8 billion. Immigrants are deeply invested in the well-being and progress of our city. Granting them the right to vote in local elections allows them to influence the rules and institutions that affect their daily lives. Moreover, this is a matter of justice and recognition of their contributions. To those who argue that non-citizens should be barred from voting, it is critical to remember that local issues such as education, public policy, infrastructure, and housing profoundly impact all residents, regardless of citizenship status. Allowing immigrant residents with legal status to vote in municipal elections ensures that policies and decisions made at this level consider the interests and perspectives of the entire community. And this is more important now than ever because immigrants have to have their voices heard because over the last few years, inflammatory anti-immigrant rhetoric has endangered immigrant safety and caused discrimination against immigrant groups to soar. And as an inescapable byproduct of this environment, immigrants continue to face disparate treatment in areas like housing, medicine, childcare, and employment. Municipal voting rights would allow immigrant groups to rise up against these injustices and be a part of creating solutions to these and other problems that face the city. For these reasons and many others, Lawyers for Civil Rights supports the effort to extend municipal voting rights to immigrants with legal status. Doing so would advance the fundamental American ideals of fairness, equality, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to go to whoever is next on our panel. I don't know if that's the commissioner, Anita Tavares.
Good afternoon, Counselor. Thank you for inviting me here to for this conversation. We are just here mainly to listen in and to answer any questions about process and what that could potentially look like.
Thank you very much. Any Lobo from Nube? And I believe we're using an interpreter or translator. Is that accurate?
Yes, Marisol is here with me.
Perfect. So as long as, because the interpreter is with you, that makes it a little bit easier. Make sure that you speak at a pace that allows them to do the translation easily.
Okay.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Gracias, Presidente Arroyo y Concejal Lara, por la oportunidad de hablar. Mi nombre es Enilda Lobo, soy la coordinadora general de la organización Nube. Somos parte de la coalición de Mass for the Table. Nuestra misión es aumentar el poder político a través del compromiso cívico con las comunidades BIPOC, inmigrantes y las comunidades de clase trabajadora en East Boston. Apoyamos la propuesta de restablecer el derecho municipal al voto para los coinmigrantes con estatus legal presentada por la concejal Lara. Marisol?
Yes. Hi, I was just taking my mic to translate. Thank you, Chair Arroyo and Councilor Lara, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Enida Lobo, lead coordinator of Nube organization. We are part of the Massachusetts Voter Table Coalition. Our mission is to increase political power through the civic engagement work in BIPOC, immigrant, and working class communities in East Boston. We support the proposal to restore the municipal right to vote for immigrants with legal status as filed by Councilor Lara.
Especialmente quiero demostrar mi fuerte apoyo al expediente número 1721 que permite el voto de los no ciudadanos. ¿Y por qué lo apoyamos fuertemente este proyecto de ley? Porque East Boston es una ciudad en gran parte inmigrante, de habla hispana, con negocios, con una economía vibrante, como cualquier otro ciudadano residente. Los inmigrantes viven, trabajan, crían a sus hijos y pagan impuestos aquí.
I especially want to demonstrate my support for docket number 1721, which allows non-citizen voting. Why do we strongly support this bill? Because East Boston is a largely immigrant, Spanish-speaking business city with a vibrant, largely Hispanic economy, as any other citizen resident. Immigrants live here, work here, raise children here, and pay taxes here.
Las leyes y políticas locales afectan cada día a los no ciudadanos que forman parte de nuestras comunidades, tanto como los residentes con derecho al voto y contribuyen en la misma medida.
Immigrants, again, live here, and they are as much part of our communities as voting residents who contribute to our tax base just as much as any other person in East Boston. I got tripped up, sorry, in that sentence.
Como residentes de East Boston, que también pagamos impuestos, queremos ser parte de las decisiones. Queremos tener representación y la opción de seleccionar quiénes son nuestros políticos que nos representen en esta ciudad. Queremos el derecho a un presupuesto transparente que refleje los 5 componentes más importantes de un ser humano: vivienda asequible, salud justa y honesta, seguridad alimentaria, trabajo digno, educación con calidad. Por esas cosas queremos poder votar y tener una voz en esta ciudad.
As residents of East Boston, we want to be part of the decisions. We want to have representation in the choice of selecting who our elected officials are that represent us in this city. We want the right to a transparent budget where the 5 most important components of a human being's well-being are reflected: affordable housing, fair and honest healthcare, food security, decent jobs, quality education, all things we want the power to vote on and have a voice in.
El año pasado, como Nube, hicimos un simulacro de votación en el que personas que no tienen voz ni decisión en el proceso político votaron por primera vez. Más de 600 personas acudieron a las urnas y ver la papeleta por primera vez y sintieron orgullo de formar parte de un proceso de votación.
Last year as Nube, we did a simulation of the voting process where people who have no voice or decision in the political process, currently not eligible to vote, voted for the first time. More than 600 people came to see the ballot and felt immense pride in being part of this process.
Nube ha visto crecer nuestro universo de no ciudadanos inmigrantes de un 6% en el 2010 a un 58% al 2022 de nuestra membresía de los inmigrantes que pueden votar.
Nube has just seen our universe of non-citizens immigrant population grow from 6% in 2010 to 58% of our collective membership in 2022.
Hay otros ejemplos en otros países y comunidades que aprobaron una propuesta similar. Por ejemplo, en 2016 se aprobó en San Francisco el non-citizen voting y muchos años antes se han aprobado en otras ciudades.
There are other examples in the country of communities that passed a similar proposal. In 2016, for example, it was passed in San Francisco, and many years before, there are other cities who also have non-citizen voting.
Nuestros vecinos no ciudadanos quieren que sus voces sean escuchadas en el sistema político. Personas como los miembros de Nube, personas como el padre de Shanique Spalding de Masbury Table quisieran tener ese derecho.
Our non-citizen neighbors want their voices to be heard in the political system. People like NUPE members and people like the voter table, including other testimonies that you were here today, as well as Shanique Spalding, who's the voter table executive director. We all believe that this is very important.
Lo último y no menos importante, he escuchado un dicho que dice menos es más, y creo que lo que es justo ustedes lo entienden y no necesitamos tanta explicación para saber el por qué es importante pasar esta ley de non-citizen voting. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
In closing, I heard a saying that goes, less is more, and I believe that what is fair needs no further explanation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. I just want to take a quick look before I head to Jesse Carpenter. I don't know if there we are.
Hi there. Good afternoon. I thought I would take a few minutes just to tell you about Tacoma Park's elections, since I think that's why I'm here, because
yes,
because we're an example. The difference in scale, though, is enormous. But thank you for inviting me today. I am Jesse Carpenter, City Clerk for the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland. I've been administering city elections since 2005. I thought I'd provide some basic information about our elections and then would be available to answer any questions that you have. Currently, we are one of 11 Maryland municipalities that allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. All of them are located in 2 Maryland counties that border the District of Columbia, Prince George's County and Montgomery County. Tacoma Park has a population of 17,500. We have around 13,000 active registered voters. We conduct our own elections for mayor and city council every 2 years. County, state, and federal elections are administered by our county board of elections. Our elections are completely separate and apart from those. This year, we celebrated 30 years of non-citizen voting in Tacoma Park. The charter amendment enabling non-citizen residents to vote was enacted in 1992, and the first election took place in 1993, where non-citizens could participate. Tacoma Park has a separate voter registration form for use by residents not eligible to register to vote in Maryland. The form is used for non-citizens, but also for residents who choose not to register with Maryland, and it's also available for residents who register and vote on the same day. At the time of registration, we review proof of Tacoma Park residency and proof of identity. We don't keep that information once the registration is accepted, and we do not ask about immigration status in Tacoma Park. In preparation for our elections, we obtained the list of Tacoma Park residents registered to vote with the state of Maryland. We combine that list with our supplemental list of voters so that there's no difference in the voter experience for for citizens and non-citizens. And so that's just my brief summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. And Sabino Piemonte is here with the Election Commission, I'm sure, to answer questions. Always good to have you here. For the counselors, just a heads up that Sabino has a 3:45 hard stop. So if you have specific questions for the elections department, you might want to get those out in this first round. I'm going to do this by order of arrival. I'm going to set a timer to try to keep us to 5 minutes here. If we get a little bit more than 5, fine, but I do want to be conscious of time because we do have that hearing later today. Counselor Lara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. And I have a few questions, and we're speaking to the panel as a whole. And so maybe this is for lawyers for civil rights. Can you talk a little bit, because I think one of the things that we hear often is, well, if they want to vote, people should just become citizens. Can you talk a little bit, and anybody on the panel is obviously invited to respond, about what are some of the barriers that people experience to becoming citizens, and how can we as a city currently support residents in trying to become citizens?
Sure, I can speak to that. So there are many layers to this. There are different visa types that people might have. There might be different statuses, as discussed by other people. Non-citizen municipal voting rights would include legal permanent residents, DACA recipients, TPS recipients, asylees and refugees, and even people who might have a U visa or a T visa. All of those have different requirements in order for that person to move on to the next stage of becoming a citizen. So they have different timelines that they might follow. They have different requirements, and the way that USCIS process them might be different. So they might have a cap. For example, U visas have a cap, a yearly cap of 10,000 visas that will get approved. Therefore, there's only so many visas that can get approved nationwide for that specific category. On top of that, there are other barriers that people might have. For example, something that is intimidating for many non-English speakers is an English test. On top of that, it's costly. I think the application is about $750, and that's just the application. On top of that, there would be attorney's fees. There's also, it takes a really long time to process. On average, I think it takes from 8 months to 2 years, or maybe longer than that. And then there's also other complications. For example, if the individual is from a country that doesn't allow dual citizenship, that might also be a barrier for them to become a citizen. And similarly, some of the other categories that I described might not be able to move on to the naturalization process because of the specific immigration status that they have.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful. I think it just really delineates and highlights that even if people are on the pathway to citizenship, or if they do want to become citizens, there are an array of other possible barriers and just general red tape that could prevent them from becoming citizens, although they've been living here, making a life here, paying taxes here in this country for however many years. I'm going to focus my next following questions for the elections department, only because I know that Sabino has a hard stop, and I want to make sure that I get these out of there. So Boston, as other people have mentioned, has an incredibly low turnout rate. And this home rule petition is meant to help enfranchise more voters that, like Councilor Coletta mentioned, would be excited to really take advantage of this privilege of voting for their local representatives. What are some ways that the elections department and the city as a whole can ensure that voters generally are more civically involved in their local elections and really showing up to the polls? Because I think that whatever interventions we put in place to just mobilize people to the polls will inadvertently impact as well the people with legal status that are going to show up to the polls. And so what are some interventions that what are some of the barriers for people showing up to the polls, and what are some of the things that we can do as a city to make sure that people who already have the right to vote are showing up?
I guess I can jump in here and just talk about some of the work that we have done to make sure that voters are informed. I would say, since I've been here as the election commissioner, there's been a lot that we have done. We have a citywide comms team that gets together every single week leading up to the election, maybe starting a couple months before the election, to make sure that we are increasing our communications with bus shelter signs, digital billboards. We've gone as far as to sending direct mailers to every single registered voter, which is only something that we started. I think this is the second year where we're actually sending the election day polling location to every single registered voter, along with the in-person early voting opportunities. We're making sure that we increase our social media presence. There's a fine line, because we are not a get out the vote organization, and we can't actively go out there and campaign, but we are trying to increase our communication and being creative about how we engage voters. This year, it was a very exciting and proud moment for me. We engaged 62 BPS students since we first started our student poll worker program in, I think it was 2017. This was the first year we had 62 students actually participate. That was up from 24 during the last election. And they are they were excited to participate. We surveyed them. I actually just got the survey back today. In the majority, I would say about 100% of the students said that they would come back and serve as a poll worker, and also excited them to continue to be part of the process and vote, and also as well as encouraging their family members to participate as well. So that's just some of the work that we're trying to do. We feel that getting them involved early actually does create that lifelong habit of actually participating and just getting involved in civic government. So that's just a little bit of what we've done here. But again, it is a fine line between us going out there and actively campaigning and getting folks excited about participating and making sure that they're informed, they have the information that they need. We're making sure that we have all of the languages staffed at our polling locations to make sure that folks who do speak a separate or a different language are actually represented and have the actual resources that they need inside of the polling location, so that it is an easy and rewarding experience and they're not deterred from showing up the next time around.
Thank you so much. And this will be my last question. I have a couple of more, but I'll wait to see if we have a second. So if this passes through the State House, I have, obviously we have questions about how the home rule petition is very vague in terms of letting the elections department really decide what implementation looks like. And so my question is really about, are there any foreseen issues that could emerge with the Secretary of State's office? And how can we address some of these scenarios in advance? For context, in our last conversation, we talked about the creation of a municipal voter registration form and the need to maintain our own database because we might be unable to maintain these voters on the one that we currently use, which would require some investment from the city and possibly more staffing. And so have you gotten any clarity in the last year on what this might look like? And we have the city clerk from Tacoma Park here, maybe who might be able to give some insight on what we've seen at Tacoma Park. I also have met with DC, we met with folks from Vermont, city councilors, and at least 6 other municipalities. And so I know that these are questions that have already been answered, but I'm curious in our context here at the City of Boston, if you have any insight about any of those things that I just mentioned.
We do not have any clarity from the Secretary of State. They are working on rolling out a new database, so we don't even know what that's going to look like yet and what capabilities that database is going to have just yet. So we're not sure, but I think this is definitely going to require a separate database, or until we use their new database, we can't make any suggestions about how we may be able to house the 2 sets of voters in their voter registration system. I think I do have some questions from the elections administrator perspective. I know that it does say that in this document that they sign under the pains and penalty of perjury that they intend to become a U.S. citizen and to begin that process if eligible. Is there going to be a timeline for that? For right now, as it stands, registered voters have to complete the annual census, and if we don't hear from them for 4 years or 2 federal elections, we are required to move them off of the list. What is the process going to look like for these new sets of voters? I think that's one question from our perspective. And then also, I think the city's charter also states that to be eligible to run for office, you have to be duly qualified to run for that seat as well. So we want to know, is this now going to make these residents eligible to run for office as well?
Yeah, and I don't know if Clerk Carpenter has any insight to any of those in terms of what happens in Tacoma Park, but I think they're good questions. I think my initial reactions is that we had similar conversations with the home rule petition for 16 and 17-year-olds. And so looking to that home rule petition about the implications and the direction that we want to move into. And I believe that with the home rule petition with 16 and 17-year-olds, we agreed that if they're able to vote, that they would be able to also run for public office. So if I remember that correctly, but I will pass it on to Clerk Carpenter to see if she has any insights.
Not sure I have much. We of course do have a separate voter registration form, as I said, and we keep our supplemental voter list separate. Again, in terms of scale, we're talking in the hundreds. So my database is an Excel spreadsheet. So it's fairly simple for us. And in terms of, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but we do have a separate voter registration list, and I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's helpful. I think that that's definitely the direction that we're moving in terms of having separate voter registration and also keeping a separate database. But it seems that there's not clarity in terms of what the cost would be like, which I think, I guess it's a problem for later since we're not there yet. Chair, I will cede my time for the next round for the administration.
Thank you. So, Councilor Braden, and just as a timing mechanism, so that the timer doesn't just go off and disrupt the hearing, what I'm doing is muting and turning off the camera. When you see the camera come on, that means you've hit 5 minutes. And so try to wrap it up there. Councilor Braden.
Thank you. I think really it's a logistical question, really having two separate voter rolls for your municipal role. I think the clerk from Tacoma Park could probably maybe enlighten us, just the practicality. I appreciate it's a small number down there, but sort of a proof of concept for us. In terms of keeping a separate role, do we have an idea of how many voters we're talking about, and then just keeping the role up to date and accurate, given that many folks in our immigrant population move around a lot and are maybe unstably housed to some extent in many cases. Just more of a practical, logistical question, how we might handle that.
So I can speak to keeping the voter list up to date. What we do, what we can with mailings and keeping track of mail that is returned from addresses for non-deliverable mail. And it is the case that the list fluctuates a lot. So it is definitely a concern to keep it as up to date as we can. And really, as we prepare for each election, we're really trying to make sure everybody on the list is still eligible to vote and is current.
And then in terms of, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if I could add to that, I think that as this would roll out, I imagine the city and other community organizations would provide community education to people who might be registering to be a municipal voter. And I think that the concern that you're bringing up, Councillor, and also the concern that Councillor Mejia brought up earlier about whether people move out of Boston and are no longer residents, or whether they're undocumented and don't have the right to register, right, for municipal voting. Well, all of these things should be clarified and made very clear to community members through community education programming and services.
Yeah, I think the question, the one concern was about putting themselves in jeopardy in terms of if they weren't already, if they're on a pathway to citizenship. You didn't want a mistake to happen that they would put that in jeopardy, because the federal government is a very black and white sort of all or nothing approach to these things. And I do appreciate the incredible cost of this process, having gone through it myself, and the length of time that it takes, and the bumps in the road that you can all of a sudden find yourself in a undocumented status if you're on a visa and that your employment finishes or whatever. So there's all sorts of barriers to participation that hopefully these that we can support our immigrant population to participate more. I'm very cognizant of the time, and I'll just I'll yield my time, Chair, and let others have a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Coletta, followed by Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I only have 2 questions, and I guess they're both for the Elections Department. So thank you, Commissioner Tavares and Sabino, for being here. I'd like to get a little bit more specific about steps if this were to be enacted. It goes to the council, the mayor, and then the state legislature. So I guess what would it take My understanding is that there needs to be a separate database. So, what would that process look like? Building it out with Do It, would you need to file an RFP for a contractor to do this? Could Do It. And then also, since it's a solicitation of folks who want to be involved in local democracy, right? So they would have to either apply or ask for an application or a voter registration form. What does that look like in terms of processing in the elections department? How would you foresee that impacting your staff capacity, if at all? If you could just walk us through that. And then also the second part of my question is data security. So we want to talk about, making sure that folks' information is not being spread or shared, especially if, their immigration status is in process or their legal permanent residence. So could you talk to us about your current data security infrastructure and if there's any plans to further secure it and secure folks' information? Thank you.
So I will say in terms of process and how long this would take, how much resources it would take, that all depends on exactly where we end up going with this. Our preferred method would be to use the Secretary of State's database because it's just one place where we can house everything. It's easier to update voter information, give voter history to voters and everything of that nature. Obviously, we would have to definitely get them on board and actually see if there are even capabilities for us to be able to maintain the two separate databases without causing any confusion there. And I guess if that's not an option, then we definitely would have to sit down and do it to see if they have the capability to build it out, or if they don't, then I think that last resort would be outsourcing this. And then in terms of security, right now, I feel like we have one of the safest voting systems in the country. We have, it's controlled by the Secretary of State, which is why our team here does not work remotely. We have to be here in the office because you can't access it from home. You can't really import anything into the database. So that's one piece of it. So I feel like we have a really secure system. So I don't know what we will end up with until we get to that point. But in terms of privacy, everyone's voting record is public information. Voter information is public, as well as all the information that is listed onto the census form. So right now, everyone, regardless of citizenship status, if they complete the census, that is public information. We do print the census books here, and if someone requests resident information, we are required to give it out. So I don't think that that's something that we will be able to keep private if someone does request that information.
Thank you for that. I think a follow-up question is, seeing that there's so much dependence on the Secretary of State's office, has there been any indication of what their thoughts are on this proposal, if they're looking at it? Have you personally talked to the Secretary of State or any representative of his about what this might look like?
No, we have not.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy, followed by Councilor Flynn.
Chair, I don't have any questions at this time. Just happy to be listening along. Many of the questions have been asked, so I won't filibuster here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Louis-Jen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the administration and to everyone for being here. I just had some questions about some of the language in the home rule petition itself. Usually when we say ordered, there's an opportunity to give some flexibility to the general court, the legislature, for it to vary in form and substance. So just wanted to know if that's something that we're considering. And then I'm curious for Clerk Carpenter. Is she still on? Yes, Clerk Carpenter in Tacoma, whether in Tacoma Park, whether there's a requirement on your voter registration form that non-citizens declare under pains and penalties of perjury that they are a legal resident and Yeah, if you require any declarations under your voter registration form.
No, only that that they affirm or swear that they are who they say they are and they live where they say they live. So they provide evidence of that at the time of registration. We do not ask about immigration status at all.
Okay.
We don't collect the information.
Yeah, so no declaration required, just an affirmance. No. There's no possibility that the form could ever be used in a court against their will, against to find them to have either perjured themselves or to have committed some crime.
No, I think not.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Chair, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez Anderson, followed by Councillor Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think going back to the question that was asked previously in terms of voting rights, then maybe to the lawyers, if the legislation is passed to allow non-citizens to vote, then are there any other considerations for candidacy or legal additional or legal considerations for candidacy as a permanent resident?
Sure. So just to clarify, that the question is whether if this were to pass and implemented, if there would be additional requirements for a municipal voter to come into office.
To run for office.
Yeah, from my understanding, it would be that if you're eligible to vote, you're eligible to run. But I can do more research to provide you with more information on that post the hearing, if you would like.
Any additional legal parameters there, if you have it, if you can provide it, that'd be great. I guess regarding eligibility
to running for. Sorry.
Yes.
I mean, I think that generally this is a topic that might seem contentious to many. So I think that, whether there's attempted legal action might be, unavoidable and to some extent. But I think that the council has, done it in the safest and most viable legal way to send it, to do it through a home rule petition. I think it's too early to tell from just where we are right now whether there would be additional legal action taken if there for someone who's running for office, who's a municipal voter as well.
Thank you, Attorney Albert. Actually, I was paraphrasing my last question just to confirm that we were on the same page. But then you did segue into my next question, which would have been about safeguarding legal parameters to making sure that people are safe. I think it goes back to Councilor Coletter's question about security and safety. And honestly, anyone who's gone through the immigration legal system does not have any faith in security in government. And that's from experience, right? So to be able to have a system that populates like a full list of non-citizens, and I just wanted to add to what the lawyers were saying, that it's not just the barriers that exist in itself. Sometimes it's life circumstances that lead you to deportation processing, right? Full transparency, I was actually in a deportation list and process for 3 years. And it was simple. It was just like, oh, the paperwork didn't go through on time, so now you have to wait 3 years, and now you have to wait another 5 years. So it can get really complex, and not all permanent residents have full 10-year permanent residency. As you know, it could be just 2 years temporary.
Right.
So considering those logistics and figuring out, okay, do we have a list to understand that their permanent residency expires within 2 years, so you're only eligible for 2 years? And I think this is more for Commissioner Tavares. And also, like, within 10 years, the 10-year qualification, the 2-year qualification, how could are there conversations already going on to discuss what that would look like if this was a possibility? If not, what do you foresee in terms of those issues?
If I can just shortly add, I think I would go back to what I said earlier, that a huge part of this is going to be community education. And what you're describing, I think, would be a huge part of that, right? Like immigrants have various different statuses, different processes that they have to go through USCIS. And if they're having those conversations with their attorneys, so they should have some understanding, right? For example, if you have DACA, right, that that you have to renew every 2 years, right? So I think that in those same conversations with the community, one thing that for sure has to be explained thoroughly is all of those different qualifications and reminders that, if you're not renewing that might affect, and you vote in a municipal election, that might have an impact, a huge impact on your immigration proceeding.
Thank you. And I guess to Commissioner Tavares, thank you so much, Attorney Albert. Commissioner Tavares, I guess just to add to that, I mean, in thinking about these processes, election department already handles a lot, and we are trying to refine and improve every time. And I know that considering your hard work, in thinking about what we were just mentioning, are there any conversations in your department or issues that you foresee in terms of the temporary versus permanent residency?
I think we would just like more clarifying language in this petition so that we know how we're implementing it. We don't know how to engage the community if we still have questions ourselves. I think kind of knowing exactly what process we're going to follow in terms of eligibility and how long we keep someone on the list and what are the requirements to actually remain on that active voting list. I think all should be clarified in this document for us. I think implementation process, I guess we're hoping that the Secretary of State would allow us to use their database if that is possible. I can't really spell out the lift until we really kind of see what database we're going to be using, because it could be simple. It could be we're just housing everyone who's already on our census in 2 separate databases, and we find a way to keep them all there, or if rebuilding an entire database from the bottom up. If that's what we are going to have to do, that is definitely going to be a little bit more of a lift, and we're going to have to work with DoIT to figure out what that process is going to look like, and whether they would have to outsource something like that. So I don't think that we're necessarily ready to kind of discuss in detail how much of a workload this would be before we know the capabilities. I know the Secretary of State's office, one thing I can say is they have been, they've gone above and beyond to work with us in a lot of different circumstances, even when it comes to special elections, and actually having to tweak their database to make sure that we're pulling voters that are only part of one district or another. It's been a little bit of a work for both parties, but they are always willing to come to the table and work with us. And I can't speak for them, but I'm hoping that will be the case, because that will be the easiest way to manage all of this.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Tavares. Through the chair, Madam Councilor, our lead sponsor, Councilor Lara, are there any modifications that you foresee? Do you anticipate a working session? I guess just maximizing on inclusivity while respecting the principles of democracy and citizenship. How are we doing that with this one? And do you see any more work to be done? I know we have a deadline. A week actually left. So just wanted to know what your thinking was.
Yeah, and I think
I'll speak on this really quickly. I looked at the schedule in advance of this hearing. It looks like Councilor Durkin has 2 separate holds on Monday and Tuesday for the exact same grant. I'm expecting that she's probably going to pick one or the other, and our office has reached out to her to grab that other time slot so that we can try to hold a working session on this. If we're unable to hold a working session on this simply because of scheduling, what amendments come through will have to sort of be workshop between myself and the original sponsor based on sort of the feedback that we're getting at this hearing and from this, if the Secretary of State's office or the Elections Commission reaches out with any specific concerns. So I already looked ahead at the schedule because it takes 48-hour notice to have a working session. We do have potentially an available date Monday or Tuesday once we hear from Councilor Durkin.
Sounds great. I look forward, if it's okay with you, to send you recommendations or suggestions as they come up. I thank you again for filing, and I'm here. Thank you both, Commissioner Tavares. Thank you so much for your hard work and wonderful service, and Attorney Albert, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Worrell, and then Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Chair. And most of my questions have been asked, but I have one question and around the eligibility question on the legal residence. And we didn't hear from Clerk Carpenter, so I wanted to hear from them on how they deal with the issue of residency, legal residence.
So as I said, we do not ask about immigration status. So once you're registered, you stay registered as long as you continue to live in the community, and we don't have the issue of trying to figure out what particular status a person is in.
Sorry about that. I must have stepped out. But yeah, that's my only question. Thank you, Chair.
And if I can interject to just speak to that a little bit, because I think it's come up, is that...
Free, Councilor.
Thank you. That we would be looking at legal status. And so it would be a little different here in the city of Boston, because if we say people who are TPS, DACA, and legal residents, then I think that there might be some mechanism by which people would have to prove their status. And so it would be a little different here in our implementation than it would be in Tacoma Park. But that would remain to be seen in our conversations, I think, both between the councilors and the lawyers for civil rights.
Thank you.
That's it. I'm assuming, Councilor Worrell?
Yes, no further questions.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again to all the advocates that are here and the administration. I just, having gone through the naturalization process myself, I failed the test the first time that I took it. And I thought just because I spoke English, I was all set, but take that test and think that you know it all, and you don't. And so I had to take it again. And so all of those things are definitely costly and time consuming. And I think it's really important as we continue to navigate this process. And I think communication is going to be really key. One of the things that I know in the voter registration form is that it does ask if you are a U.S. citizen. And so Commissioner Tavares, and I may have missed this, but that form would need to be updated, right? So it'll say, are you a U.S. citizen or a legal resident? Correct? No, we will not be asking people to check a box to confirm whether or not they're eligible to register to vote. I may have missed that. Councilor Ladin, if you already have addressed it, or if not, I'd like to know kind of what the paperwork would look like, just because I want to make sure that we're getting ahead of creating unintended consequences for people, so that the additional box, are you a U.S. Citizen or a legal resident, I think would help us address the concern of that unintended consequence of people filling out a form if they were not a U.S. citizen. So can someone here speak to that as a possibility?
So I would say, as the election administrator here, I would definitely require two separate forms, especially where we may have to have two separate databases, so that there's no confusion as to which election someone is eligible for when it comes to us processing that voter registration form. It's either we're going to register them as a voter so that they're eligible to vote in all elections, including federal elections, or we're registering them just for the municipal elections. So I would keep those two entirely separate.
Okay, and now, so in that case, right? And I think this goes to Councilor Coletta's question in regards to kind of like data mining and management. Have you given thought to what type of capacity you're going to need, or somebody would need to say, you know, my legal status was extended 2 more years. Do they need to reamp? You know, reapply again? Like, kind of just walk me through the mechanics of that process.
I think that's kind of some of the language that I would like clarified in this document here, is how we're going to handle circumstances or situations like that. How are we going to determine how long someone's eligible for, and what are the requirements to continue to be eligible through this process? That's something that needs to be clarified in this document. For regular voters, it's clearly spelled out in Mass General laws that you have to remain on the active voting list. You have to return your census, and then if you don't return your census for 2 federal voting cycles or 4 years, then you become removed as a registered voter. And I think that that is language that needs to be specified in this document.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I guess the last thing that I'll just kind of add is that we get mail sent to us about, you know, the Boston annual census or whatever it is, or you're an active voter, or you're not an active voter. I think that piece of information, just in terms of like, people don't even know that much, and these are U.S. citizens who need to know that if they're not keeping up with their paperwork, they're going to be unenrolled and they're going to have to re-register, right? So I think all of those nuances, just for, you know, a traditional voter, is worth understanding. There's some work to do there. So as we continue to navigate this in terms of communication, in terms of rollout, in terms of education, to Attorney Albert's point is that so much of this is going to rely on making sure that we are supporting nonprofit organizations and our community partners. And as we continue to navigate this, that we can't just think that the elections department is going to hold all of this. So as part of the rollout, or maybe even it's during the budget cycle that we're advocating, but that there's some dollars set aside for this type of level of education and engagement, so that we can really make sure that we're set up for success here. And I think that while we're not going to be able to add that into the ordinance in terms of a dollar amount, I just think it's important for us as the council to really think about how do we strengthen this in a way that's going to reach the intended outcome, which is to make sure that more people are voting who are eligible to vote, and that you all have the tools to be able to execute against that vision. And that includes supporting nonprofit organizations to do that work in partnership with the council. So I think just want to offer that as something for us to keep thinking top of mind. And then the last thing that I'll say is that, yes, we have a very low voter turnout in general. We filed a home rule petition to lower the voting age. And I'm from the school of thought is anything and everything that we can do to increase voter engagement, whether that means activating people who are not traditionally eligible to vote, really helps support democracy. And I think it's important for us to explore all of those options, including giving legal residents the opportunity to do just that. And so just want to go on the record again to affirm my support, and looking forward to a working session so that we can tweak out the language and get it to a place where all of our colleagues feel really good about the work that we're doing here, so that when we move it over to the State House, it doesn't die, because we already know that most things go there to die. So we want to keep this alive and keep the process going. So thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, advocates, and thank you, Councilor Lara, for bringing this to the forefront. And I look forward to continuing the work. That's it, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I'm going to go to Councilor Lara, and if any of my council colleagues have questions for a second round, just raise your Zoom hand, and I'll go in order that way instead of just calling on each and every single one of you. So if you have questions for a second round and you already know that, raise your Zoom hand, and I will go to you. Otherwise, Councilor Lara, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the commissioner and Sabino for being here and answering these questions. I think that the home rule petition was submitted in the way that it was for this specific conversation, because I think the elections commission, you know more in terms of what you would need, right? What is the information that you need? And so you've mentioned a couple of things already that would be helpful to be outlined in the home rule petition for the elections department. Is there anything else that you have not mentioned in this conversation in the last hour that would be helpful to be included in the home rule petition for the purpose of informing the planning of the elections department?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you so much. That's really helpful. And I want to ask, just because Tacoma Park, 30 years doing non-citizen voting, and Nube, and Nube is all of Nube's work in East Boston and in the community with this community. I want to talk a little bit about the impact. So first in Tacoma Park, 30 years of enfranchising people who are not citizens. What have you seen has been the impact to that community? Like what has been the impact of doing this for 30 years in Tacoma Park, if any at all? And for Nube, if you could talk a little bit about what you see as the possibility if we make this happen.
Sure. I would just respond that Tacoma Park definitely considers itself a welcoming community, and we have that reputation and we try to maintain it. I can't say that I can show that there's evidence of what a difference it's made, but treating everyone the same way is a really wonderful thing. And I should say we also have 16-year-old voting in Tacoma Park. So which also works very well for us. Yes, so when people find out that they are eligible to register and vote, they are very pleased. I'll just say that.
Thank you. And if we can hear from you, Marisol, if you want to translate the question, and if anybody else wants to share.
Thank you, Councilor Kendra Lara. Yeah, creo que para la comunidad en East Boston sería un gran impacto, porque siempre Nube es una organización que saca miles de votantes, habla con miles de votantes. En el 2022 hablamos como con 8,500 votantes, y nadie de los que estamos sacando el voto podemos votar. Entonces es interesante cómo nosotros podemos influir en las políticas públicas de East Boston, y podríamos generar un gran cambio realmente al elegir nuestros próximos representantes que sean más auténticos con la comunidad. Y para eso Diana y Yanni, que trabajan con Nube, tienen testimonios de cómo se vería y cómo impactaría tener un non-citizen voting localmente.
Yeah, I just want to say that in East Boston, we constantly work with thousands and thousands of residents of our community, many of them who are active voters, and a great majority of them who are not currently eligible to vote. The impact this would bring for the betterment of our community is significant. Just in recent years, we've seen over 8,000 voters participating locally, in seeing the increase in voter participation because of the work that we're doing. We believe fundamentally that we deserve to be involved with the process of electing authentic representation and keeping our residents engaged civically. You will hear from Diana and Yanni today as well, who are Nube members that also are bringing testimony regarding the impact that this could have for our community.
Thank you very much. Councilor Lara, I don't know if you have any other questions.
No further questions. I just want a clarification from the Petitions Department about what else we should look to make additions to for the home rule petition, and maybe open it up to lawyers for civil rights to see if there's anything that you think we should also include here.
I think that the concerns that were brought up are important. I think earlier it was also mentioned something about the language in the oath, and how that should be phrased. I think that that's also an important consideration moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually had questions for the commissioner, and I see that her time was up, so I reserve my time. Thank you.
The commissioner's time isn't, Sabino's is, unless the commissioner has also left.
I don't see her here.
Yeah, it looks like she also left. Do you have anything else for anybody else here? Okay.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to open the floor up to community comment now. We have, it looks like 5 people who are currently present for community comment. We'll go in order of signing up for community comment. And so I'm going to give 3-minute timers here. And so we're going to start with Lou Murray, if he's present. Mr. Murray, when you're ready, 3 minutes. Whenever you're ready, you can unmute. You have 3 minutes. You're muted, Mr. Murray. You're on video, but you're muted. Mr. Murray, you're muted.
Administration may be able to unmute him, Mr. Chair.
No, I think they've already tried. You technically can't force unmute. They have to hit the unmute button. You can ask them to unmute, but you can't actually force the unmuting.
Got it.
Mr. Murray, there should be just a button that says unmute or a symbol. I see you tried. I'm not trying to rush you off. I'll go to the next one while you figure that out. Is that okay, Mr. Murray? Just give me a thumbs up. Yep, perfect. Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Floor is yours, Mr. Nelson.
As an African American, I'm outraged over this proposal of non-citizen voting. It limits the ability of African Americans to get our candidates elected. Ultimately, this proposal will violate the Voting Rights Act. This proposal effectively will bypass the requirements of learning about the immigrant's new country, building a nationalization process. Doesn't require a demonstration of fundamental English language. Doesn't require the demonstration of knowing the knowledge of the American civics or history. The acknowledgement of knowing how in the short term in time. New non would be familiar with the politics, the history, the culture, the language, and the issues being allowed for the voting for the voting. Having been granted a green card can simply acknowledge that you have been applied for and granted permanent residency. Allowing non-citizens to vote before they have gone through their naturalization process will likely diminish immigrants' interest in taking their process. This turn is likely to minimize the process through which many immigrants increase their emotional and psychological attachments to their new American communities. Proposal to allow non-citizens to vote fails to recognize that attachment and important parts of integrating immigrants into the American national community. While Boston City Council has the right to allow illegal aliens to vote in mutual issues, they don't have the right to dilute the electoral power of American citizens. Allowing aliens to vote will shift the dynamic of power in Boston, majority away from African American communities. Our voices will be impacted when it comes to the bills of this bill, and our voices will be even weakened. The same progressives that are pushing for this bill ran a black woman against another black African American woman who was the acting mayor. The same progressives on the city council are trying to push this through to dilute the African American vote. And as a Bostonian, I'm telling the progressives on the council, we do not want this. We want to make sure that African American votes will still be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Murray, there you go. I see you're unmuted.
There you go. Got it?
Yep, you're unmuted.
Beautiful. Can you even see me now?
Yeah, both things working now.
That's great. Like so many things in this law for non-citizen voting, the use of no taxation without representation is a sloppy and inaccurate sop to history. If the 13 colonies could elect parliamentary representation or have some form of home rule legislature like Ireland did in 1773, there would still be rules as to who could vote, largely centered around British laws of land ownership and membership in the established church. There is no evidence in pre-revolutionary Massachusetts of a deteriorating respect for law. It was the cussed American spirit that would devise both our independence from England and our rules for self-government. Voters are like jurors, and their worth and truthfulness to their duty must be vetted. While it is possible that immigrants with a citizenship application pending may have been able to vote in Boston's distant past, the country was in its infancy. The American Republic and its urban centers matured. We found that the best way to govern ourselves was to only allow citizens to vote. This notion of vetting the immigrant before allowing him to live in full accord and citizenship with his adopted country comes down to us from ancient Israel and was examined under the philosophy of the Greeks and the Christians like Thomas Aquinas. Ancient Israel treated members of different migrating tribes differently under their laws based on the amount of hostility or harmony that group had exhibited. It could take 2 generations for some foreigners to be fully accepted into the nation of ancient Israel. The reason for this was that if foreigners were allowed to meddle in the affairs of a nation as soon as they settled down in its midst, St. Thomas Aquinas logically reasoned, many dangers might occur, since the foreigners, not yet having the common good firmly at heart, might attempt something hurtful to the people. The citizenship process is a vetting process, much like choosing a jury. As the nation matured, Massachusetts led America in having a clean and clear voting rules, being the first state to adopt the Australian voting reforms. These reforms, standard paper ballots, open voting, open counting, neutral government officials maintaining voting rolls and running the polls, instilled faith in elections and in our elected officials like you, Councilor Arroyo. Allowing non-citizens to vote will introduce new elements of doubts in our elections. I'm a member of Bostonians Against Sanctuary Cities. We wholeheartedly oppose the Boston City Council docket number 1721. I'm almost through with my testimony. Voting must be reserved for American citizens. We had offered an opposition panel that would be scheduled to speak as an organized group. This offer was not accepted. The irony of proposing an expansion of voting rights to, quote unquote, hear more voices, while simultaneously stifling organized opinion offered as an expert panel testimony, is not lost on our committee or on the citizens of Boston who oppose this bill. According to the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse of Syracuse University, over 257,000 migrants have crossed America's open southern border and recently registered with the Boston Immigration Court. This home rule petition states that any resident of Boston with legal status will be eligible to vote. Although the petition states that 28% of the population are immigrants who would be allowed to vote, we believe the number of aliens who could claim some form of legal status is much higher. Further, the term legal status is so amorphous that this bill has the potential to see Bostonians and Americans ruled by foreigners. Lastly, in recent years, there have been over half a dozen scandals at the Registry of Motor Vehicles in Massachusetts. I'm almost done. How can we be sure that allowing unvetted foreign citizens in our Boston elections, some poor record keeper or computer operator, won't pollute the voting rolls and affect state and local elections? Councilor Lara, I believe you're familiar with how different states' motor vehicle departments can send out confusing letters. Furthermore, foreign nationals voting in Boston elections could corrupt the voter rolls. This is already occurring in other states. I'm submitting written testimony to that effect. In other municipalities, because of the National Voter Registration Act, commonly called the Motor Voter Act. NVRA is a federal law requiring the DMV to offer voter registration. Foreign nationals that register to vote in federal elections can mar their chance for naturalization and eventual citizenship. A confusing new system could hurt many aliens who wish to one day become naturalized citizens, because this law would make them susceptible to error in registering inadvertently for state and federal elections. 3 more sentences. In conclusion, expanding Boston's municipal voting population to an ill-defined group of foreign citizens and residents undermines the meaning of citizenship, and it is an insult to Black Americans who fought for their voices to be heard at the ballot box for over half a century, and to all the people who obeyed the laws and studied to become citizens, even if they had to take the test twice. Councilor Julia. Expanding the electorate to include foreign citizens undermines the very notion of citizenship. With citizenship comes loyalty to America and a shared interest in the future of the country. Foreign nationals have no investment in the future of America or Boston. Thank you very much.
Have a good evening, Ms. Murray.
Thank you, sir.
Yanira Lobo and Diana Cifuentes. We also have Palma McLaughlin. Those are the 3 in a row there in that order. So if you can make them all panelists. If we can start with Yanira Lobo, and I believe the next 2 are going to require translation. If the translator, Marisol, if you could let them know to go slowly so that in terms of breaking up their statements, that you have time to speak.
Permission to just ask a clarifying question.
Absolutely.
This is Marisol.
Yep.
Would you prefer that the folks giving testimonies I'm going to translate for, we can break it down per paragraph as opposed to letting them do their whole testimony and then I can translate in English?
Yeah, I think it's better if you do it paragraph by paragraph. That way it's easier for you and it's more accurate to what they're saying.
Great, thank you. Yanira y Diana, que pide el jefe del comité, el concejal Arroyo, pide de que si se puede hacer el testimonio y la traducción párrafo por párrafo, y si pueden dar una pausa y así yo puedo traducir en vez de hacer todo el testimonio por completo.
Ok.
Ok, bien, gracias.
Ok. ¿Empieza, Marisol?
Sí, puede empezar, Yanira.
Ok, gracias. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Yanira Lobo, soy residente de East Boston y trabajo para Nube.
Good afternoon. My name is Janita Lobo, and I'm here today as a member of Nube.
Como organizadora comunitaria. Gracias al concejal Arroyo y Kendra Lara por tomar el liderazgo en este tema tan importante para la comunidad inmigrante.
I am also a community organizer for Neighbors United for a Better East Boston. Thank you to Councilor Arroyo and Councilor Lara for taking leadership on this very important issue for our immigrant community.
Estoy testificando en apoyo a la petición de la ley especial Docket 1721 porque este proyecto, al ser aceptado, tendría un gran impacto positivo para nuestra comunidad.
I am here testifying in support of this special petition number 1721 because this bill, if accepted, would bring a great positive impact for our entire immigrant community.
Ya que podríamos ser partícipes de muchos cambios y beneficios para todos los residentes, ya que beneficiaría a las generaciones presentes y futuras.
We believe deeply that this is part of many changes and benefits for all residents. It would greatly benefit not only our present residents, but future generations to come.
Durante mi trabajo de tocar puertas, he podido analizar cómo muchos de nuestros votantes no confían en los representantes o candidatos. Por eso, el trabajo de compromiso cívico.
And during my time knocking on doors and engaging with residents and voters, we have analyzed how hard it is for people to trust their representation. It makes our work extremely difficult and challenging, but yet we still do it.
Compromiso cívico de nube se hace cada vez más difícil cuando llegamos para preguntar si van a salir a votar. Hay muchas personas que manifiestan que se les miente, que se les dice una cosa, llegamos con una propuesta y no se cumple. Como por ejemplo la del presupuesto participativo.
And residents often feel frustrated that they are being lied to. Oftentimes when we have to go back to the doors, it takes a lot of great work to engage with them. In particular, just recently and regarding participatory budgeting.
East Boston, no sé si recuerdan, East Boston fue la ciudad con más votos a favor del presupuesto participativo y este año regresamos con nuestros votantes a pedirles que enviaran un mensaje a los concejales actuales, exigiéndoles que aprobaran los 40 millones y ellos dijeron que ya se había aprobado en el 2021 eso.
Back to participatory budgeting and wanting to keep the lines of communication open with residents. Most of our residents in Nube, we found that the most votes that came in favor of participatory budget came from our community. When we went back to people on the doors asking them to, send another message to their current counselors in support of approving 40 million, they said that it had already been approved, and this created confusion.
Y que por qué, ¿verdad? Tenían que enviar mensajes cuando ya ellos habían hecho, ¿verdad? Esa petición en el 2021. También los votantes expresan que los políticos les visitan solamente cuando necesitan el voto.
Yes, and including that when we were sending messages regarding participatory budget, a lot of the voters asked, why did we have to send the message again? Voters expressed that elected officials visit them, and only when they need their vote. So we consider that this must change.
Sorry, that's not what she said.
¿Puede volver a repetirlo, Yanira, para volver a traducir?
¿El que le acabo de decir?
Sí, su última oración.
Ella dijo que los políticos solamente le visitan los votantes en el tiempo de elección.
Sí, es que también nuestros votantes expresan que los políticos les visitan solamente cuando necesitan el voto. Sin duda eso debe de cambiar. ya que Nube cree firmemente que los votantes no son un juego, ¿verdad? Y saben perfectamente cuando la gente solo los está utilizando.
Yes, thank you. I don't have my Zoom open. Thank you for the woman who spoke to clarify her translation. She just reiterated what the translation was, that folks feel that they're only being talked to when they're asked for a vote.
Pues, verdad que nuestros votantes no son solo un número, sino son seres humanos que se dan cuenta que tienen también necesidades, como parece que es, o sea, pareciera que los candidatos lo que están haciendo nada más es solo usándolos, según la versión de los clientes, ¿verdad? Pero es una relación transicional y no auténtica muchas veces la que ellos tienen con los votantes.
Voters expressed that, again, that Nube believes that this should be changed and that the voter is not a number but a human being. It seems that this has created more transactional relationships and not authentic, which is the work that Nube wants to do.
Pedimos a este comité tomar acción y pasar la propuesta de votantes no ciudadanos y tener la oportunidad de elegir nuestros representantes.
We ask that this committee take action and pass the non-citizen voters proposal and have the opportunity to elect our representatives.
Gracias por todo y muy linda tarde para todos.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for everything. Yes, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much. Diana C. Fuentes.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Diana Cifuentes. Soy residente de East Boston y trabajo para Nube como asistente administrativa. Gracias al concejal Arroyo y Kendra Lara por tomar liderazgo en este tema tan importante para la comunidad inmigrante.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Cifuentes. I'm a resident of East Boston, and I work for Nube as an administrative assistant. Thank you to Councilor Arroyo and Councilor Lara, for taking leadership on this important issue for our immigrant community.
El día de hoy estoy testificando en apoyo a la propuesta número 1721 porque considero que como persona que no puede votar, me gustaría participar en las decisiones que afectan o favorecen a la comunidad más vulnerables y afectadas en todos los procesos.
I am testifying in support of this proposed law number 1721 because I believe that as a person who cannot vote, I personally would like to participate in decisions that affect or favor the most vulnerable and affected community in all our processes.
Como Nube, he visto el crecimiento de nuestra comunidad latina que ha salido a votar masivamente en las elecciones 2021, 2022 y 2023.
As a member of Nube, I have seen the growth of our Latinx community that has come out to vote massively in the 2021, 2022, and 2023 elections.
Creo que a través del voto podemos cambiar políticas públicas no favorables a nuestra comunidad. Como mencionó nuestra coordinadora de Nube, que nuestra comunidad paga impuestos, tiene familia, son dueños de casa, tiene negocios, tiene carro. Todos debemos permanecer y tener derechos a tener una voz en la comunidad.
I believe through voting, we can change public policies that are not favorable to our community. As our Nube coordinator mentioned, our community pays taxes, has families, owns homes, has businesses, has cars, and we all must remain and have the right to have a voice in this community.
Por lo que consideramos que el poder sistemático debe cambiar, comenzando por lo local. Nube demanda que todos los residentes, sin excepción, deben tener una voz y voto dentro de la comunidad donde viven.
So we believe that systemic power must change starting at the local level. Nube demands that all residents, without exception, should have a voice and a vote within the community where they currently live.
Pedimos a este comité tomar acción y pasar la propuesta para la propuesta de votantes no ciudadanos y tener la oportunidad de elegir nuestros representantes. Gracias.
We ask that this committee take action and pass the non-citizen voters proposal so that we may have an opportunity to elect the representatives of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our, I believe, last person who signed up for public comment, Palma McLaughlin.
Hi, thank you very much.
Hi, the floor is yours.
I will not need a translation, but I also will be submitting more detailed written testimony once I finish my citations.
Perfect. Thank you.
In general, I like the idea of expanding the franchise. It has merit. It's this proposal that I find problematic. I'm concerned that it is more of a commentary on our broken immigration system and not about voting, and there is vague and confusing language in the proposal. At the founding, there were no citizens. They were just former British subjects. Massachusetts Constitution provided the criteria for voting: sex, age, durational residency, and wealth. And over the time, that has changed. Most significantly, in 1857, after the Dred Scott decision stated that men of African descent could not become citizens, Massachusetts offered a scathing rebuke and passed a law providing passports and citizenship certificates to colored men. In 1861, a peace conference proposed avoiding the Civil War by throwing out Massachusetts for, among other things, having the audacity to allow colored men to vote. Some states, immigrants who voted were subject to military conscription, but immigrants who did not vote were not. In 1879, Massachusetts allowed women to vote in school committee elections, but they refused multiple times to extend the franchise any further until the 19th Amendment. In 1924, Native Americans were declared citizens and then could subsequently vote. In 1941, when they lowered the voting age for draft, the next resolution proposed was to lower the, when they lowered the draft age to 18 in 1941, the next resolution introduced was actually to lower the voting age. That did not happen for a while. In 1964, the 24th Amendment ended poll taxes, which effectively ended an income requirement for voting. In 1971, there was a 26th Amendment. There was also the case of Dunn v. Bloomstein, which regarded both age and durational residency. In particular, Dunn v. Bloomstein should be included as some kind of criteria in this proposal. This should be about civic participation, not immigration. This proposal covers more than 50 categories of immigrant visas. That's separate from non-immigrant visas, including students and those awaiting deportation. It is not just those that are implied in Section 2 as pre-citizens. Democracy is hard. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Voting is important, but it is at the very bare minimum of civic participation. Is it a privilege, a right, or a duty? How is citizenship related to voting and participation or not? Those are the questions that need to be answered outside of the federal immigration system. I would like to answer a couple of questions I heard earlier in terms of eligibility for office. Voting and citizenship may or may not be required for voting or for holding office. Most of those are handled separately. For example, the president must be a natural born citizen. And then there are other durational type things, whereas other places, no. And one last thing I would like to do, since I have the time, I would like to put it on the record. My district councilman, Frank Baker, even though he's not here, is retiring, and I would like to wish him fair winds and following seas.
Thank you, and I believe his staff would probably make sure he gets that.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Mostly just make sure that you do send. I would be very interested in whatever you send in, so please do send that. It's ccc.go@boston.gov for that email.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm working on my citations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then I believe Marisol Santiago, also, who has been translating for us, would also like to give her own personal testimony to this. So the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Chairman Arroyo. Good evening again, everyone. My name is Marisol Santiago. I am currently a Chelsea resident and have spent years in relationship with many advocates across this region, in particular East Boston, Revere, Everett, and other communities just a little bit north of Boston. I'm here to say that I just really want to give my gratitude to Councilor Lara and the committee members for really lifting this important proposal. And I think it's important, to just be reminded that we are currently in a state where no matter what corner of the globe we come from, when our home is where we live and where we rest our head, where we send our children to. And as a former school committee member in the city of Chelsea, we are constantly in conversations with parents that want to have a voting voice in policy changes. And I think that irrespective of the different groups of people that have been historically disenfranchised, we are able to accomplish expanding democracy, expanding access through this proposal in ways that is only going to make our communities stronger and better. This will increase participation in civic processes. This will uplift voices of parents inside the schools in ways that empower them and empower young people. And I do agree that decoupling the municipal census is also a way that's going to increase access, but that is outside the purview I get right now of the Boston City Council. So this is one way that we can continue to improve what historically our peoples have been oppressed, because we did not design these systems, we did not create them. And so the burden here is not on families and the people that have testified today and how this is going to improve it. I think I am just grateful that we can all put our heads together as advocates, as elected officials, as counselors, and as people that are committed to increasing democracy, removing barriers to voting. And this is just one way that we could do that. So thank you, counselors. Thank you to the committee. And I look forward to see next steps and what could be possible.
Thank you very much. And then Robin Chen, I believe, from the League of Women Voters.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be really clear that I do not represent the League of Women Voters in the remarks I'm about to make. I am a member and a volunteer of that organization, and I will be so delighted to serve if there become newly eligible voters, any information and assist the Election Commission. And in particular, at our 2022 annual meeting, we had the Election Commissioner come and answer our questions. She was delightful. I really liked that. So I reside in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But when I lived abroad in New Zealand and people asked me where I was from, I said I was from Boston because it was the biggest metropolitan statistical area that was internationally recognizable. And when I see media stories about this proposal for home rule petition, it surveys readership of media outlets that have Boston in their name. So I do think that I speak, this is important to me. I also am married to somebody who has gone through the U.S. naturalization process, and I'm daughter of somebody who went through the U.S. naturalization process, granddaughter of somebody who went through the U.S. naturalization process. But I was born in Providence, Rhode Island. And when I ride the MBTA, I pull out my Charlie card, and it reminds me of that song, Charlie on the MTA, which talks at first about people. Hey, people, something's going on here, it's wrong. I don't have the exact quote, but you should go back and look it up. But then there's this notion of the citizens of Boston. So it really irks me anytime somebody calls people non-citizen. And I would really urge the committee to think hard about language and perhaps don't use non-citizen, use citizen of Boston. In particular, when I read the city charter of Boston, I see that there are rights and responsibilities expected of inhabitants. Specifically, and the use of the word shall. Shall expresses a future tense. Shall also expresses a strong assertion or intention. So the inhabitants of the city shall continue to be a municipal corporation under the name existing at the time of the adoption of any plan provided in this act, and shall have, exercise, and enjoy all the rights, immunities, powers, and privileges, and be subject to all the duties, liabilities, and obligations provided for in this act or otherwise pertaining to or incumbent upon said city as a municipal corporation. Municipal meaning city, corporation meaning a body. So this is a body politic, right? We are a polity where we are metaphorically a physical body, and our sovereign is self-sovereignty, where all the members of that body have power, and their will, the will of the people, is what's meant to direct the course of our government at all levels of government. In particular, I agree with the person who spoke before me, who said that our government processes should be for all residents without exception. I think that this home rule petition should eliminate U.S. citizenship requirement for voting in municipal elections. But since it already mentions age, I would love for it to also eliminate age requirements in the petition for voting rights at the municipal level. In particular, children conceive of their identity as being, let's say, school district based. When I went to Old South Meeting House on Sunday evening, I spoke to an usher who grew up in Medford, and at the age of 10 was so delighted to realize that the Boston that was mentioned in 4th grade class is just a little ways away, and that visiting the Paul Revere House is a thing that can happen really easily. So we are, people of Boston are Bostonian, they are Bay Stater, they, well, hopefully would like to become American, but they're living on American soil. They're subject to American laws. It is cumbersome to need to change, like, who exactly is on which list. Just let the street listing, the annual census, be the voter eligibility list. And that takes away a lot of the administrative barriers, the costs that you'll have to pay for this. When I looked at the DC law that's similar to this and there's a financial impact statement, and it's like very expensive. I mean, compared to what I spend for my household, obviously, to implement election reforms. And I'll just recall that for the 26th Amendment, like part of what got the 26th Amendment passed so quickly, it was like fastest ever passed, was the threat of the administrative cost of having separate voter rolls for state elections and national elections. So, please relieve the Election Commission from having to do a lot of tedious entry to, there's 41 different types of immigration status, and to what extent did they say the oath correctly or not? This is ridiculous. Just simplify the oath to what Tacoma Park has. If people are already following the law, then they're lawful. It doesn't need to be part of whether or not their voice matters. And I guess just the last point I'll make, somebody referenced the tribe of Israel. The United States has, at its federated levels, we're a pluralist society. There is not a single best interest group. And the way that we reconcile our different interests is through these democratic processes. So everybody needs to feel that they have equal opportunity, equal representation of their interests in government in order for us to cohabit, be people living alongside each other, and feel that the laws that we all are subject to are just. Thank you for hearing my remarks, and I'll be very happy to speak further with anybody who's interested, whether that is fellow citizens of the greater Boston area or counselors or panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. That is our final member of community for community comment. And so this hearing is adjourned. Hopefully that gives more than enough time for folks who are prepping for the next hearing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Central staff. And please send me any edits or suggestions you have for this, just in case we can't lock in a working session date. Thank you.
Thank you.